Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
The work done by the thousands of North Dakota oil and natural gas workers is working to improve energy independence and national security. Working to make America more competitive around the world. And working to provide a better today and tomorrow for everyone in North Dakota and across our country. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas works for our future. North Dakota Petroleum Foundation, advancing the possibilities.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? I got to admit, I'm a little distracted heading into recording this show because I can see the end of the legislative session from here, and I am so ready for it. I am tired and exhausted, and the thing is, like, I shouldn't even be complaining. I'm not down in the hothouse. I'm just, watching all this stuff unfold. But it has been.
Which conference committee are we missing right now, Rob? That you?
I am actually. Well, it's not a conference committee. I'm pretty sure the property tax plan is back in Senate Finance and Tax, but it's sounding like I think they've got a deal. And
in the full committee.
I don't understand it entirely, and I wish I could be watching it right now. But my understanding yeah, I'm sorry, I have to do my show. My understanding is that they have a deal, and the deal is going to be pretty much right where we started, with a $1,550 credit, a 3% cap, and no skin in the game, which is precisely, I mean, there's some other technical corrections. They did some stuff, they were really concerned about capping schools, which may be important to our guest. There were some questions about, and there's some debate over, stopgap funding in the interim to make sure that we're not hurting our schools. But, for the most part, we're going to get what the governor wanted. Anyway, my guest host today, who we've already heard, Aaron Oban, sitting in for Chad, who is really on vacation.
Who's actually on vacation, and quite a long one, frankly.
I am so jealous that he's gonna watch baseball. He's gonna go to Pearl Jam.
We went to Pearl Jam last night. I was getting a couple videos sent to me. I
don't even like Pearl Jam that much. I don't really like what Eddie Vedder did to like a whole generation of lead singers, where they were all doing the Eddie Vedder voice, and it was just a long time. Maybe
is that okay?
Maybe that's an old guy thing, but that really bothered me. Our guest is Katie Christensen. She is the president of the Fargo School Board, and we're going to talk with her a little bit. First of all, I mean, Katie, we didn't have you on about this, but what do you make of the property tax as a local governing, head of a local governing entity? How are you feeling about how this property tax debate unfurled?
And can I add to that question, based on now the 2.5% increase per year of the next biennium for K-12 schools?
Yeah, I mean, I'm deeply concerned. I'm really, really worried. There's really no other way to put it. And I think you both know Robin Nelson is the chair of our governmental affairs committee. So she sends out updates, and it just feels like every half hour, every hour, something is changing. Is like trying to keep up with where we end up landing. But it does look like we're going to land on a 2.5% increase for K-12 education both years, which is really quite detrimental to us. I mean, that's not keeping up with inflation. That's going to be really, really rough for our budgets. But then we're also looking at the 3% caps on property tax. Our mill levies our mill levy approval only lasting for 4 years, and that those votes need to happen during the primary or general election. And those things can, quite frankly, be really catastrophic for our K-12 funding.
Yeah, it's a tough situation because on the other hand, the public has had it with property taxes. And if we didn't, I mean, they had to do something, and maybe this isn't it, but I am really afraid if they didn't do some shock and awe this session, we were going to get a ballot measure and it was going to be worse. But anyway, we didn't have you on to talk about that. We wanted to talk a little bit about, what's going on in the federal government, which is going to kind of be a theme of the show. Later on in the show, we're going to be talking with an employee, and frankly, at one time was also a user of disability services, a disability program at Minot State University that, because of all the chaos with federal funding, they had to cut 23 members of their staff. So that's going to be interesting. We're going to be talking with him. But as far as the Fargo Public School District, you guys have been getting some heat. You discontinued some educational justice philosophies. And I want to be really clear. What is that? Was it just like some mission statement stuff on your website? I mean, I don't, calling something a philosophy, is it a policy? What specifically has changed?
Yeah, Rob, that's actually a really great question, because it is putting us, it's a little bit of a conundrum. And I think even within the board and the district where we ask ourselves, so what is the philosophy? So in July of 2023, it's my understanding that our current superintendent, Dr. Gandhi, who, as you know, he has resigned, and so we are going to have a new superintendent stepping in soon. He basically, I think, wanted to put out some public statements in support of certain areas that were very concerning to him, to our students, and to some of our staff. And basically what he did is he pulled some philosophies from the NEA, from the National Education Association, adopted them, got some feedback from other people in the community, some other groups. And then as a board, we affirmed the statements in 2023, and we reaffirmed them in 2024. But the problem was it did create a little bit of a conundrum. I mean, there are these value statements that I believe in. I inherently believe in them deeply, but we don't really know where they fit in terms of our district. Like, we have a mission statement, we have our values and our vision, and we have a strategic plan, and we have policies. They're not really embedded in those. And so I think a lot of board members and a lot of people in our community and our district strongly believe in these statements, but just what you were saying is that even after we affirmed them, we weren't really sure, like, where do they fit in the decision-making process and where do they fit in terms of budgeting? So truthfully, it didn't actually change anything. So the philosophies were pulled from the website, but we still have administrative policies that protect our students and staff, anyone in our buildings, from discrimination. And it's actually discrimination based on race, religion, gender, sexual orientation. There's a long list there. We still actually carry out our educational justice values. We still have an educational justice program that really works to implement district-wide equitable processes. We still use restorative practices. So it didn't change anything within our buildings, any of our operations. It didn't change anything procedurally.
So what did it do?
That's a good question. I mean, honestly, to some extent, I think it brought maybe comfort. I think it provided this external, like, I do believe in value statements. I mean, I want to make that very clear, but I think
but you said these weren't value statements, right? You have mission,
well, sorry. Yeah, well, they're not, I guess they're an expression of values, but they're not the district's value statements. They are the district's philosophy. So, but that's the question. I mean, what did they do? And I think to some extent it was an external message about some of our stances on some particular legislation and some things that were going on, maybe locally and nationally, to try to bring some relief or bring some comfort to people that this is what we believe in. This is what we want.
And to be fair, Katie, I mean, overwhelmingly what was included in the philosophy, maybe it would help. Have we read what the philosophy was? I don't even know how long it was. But I mean, the focus was on primarily like marginalized communities. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I actually had pulled them up and now, of course, I can't find them. But there were 4 specific categories. There was honesty in education. There was disability justice. I think there was affirming LGBTQIA plus students, and then there was restorative practices. So yeah, I mean, it was very much heavily focused on vulnerable populations, marginalized populations, and I think a lot of this there was concern about just truth in education, that we rely on our teachers and our librarians to determine. They're the experts in their field, so they're the ones that select our materials. But we also have an administrative policy that already says that. So it was really more of like an external facing document explaining, giving a little clarity to what's already embedded in our policies.
I don't like what motivated the Trump administration, because this is kind of a reaction, right? I mean, the Trump administration is very sensitive and they're singling out schools, organizations. I mean, anybody that has sort of, I guess rhetoric for or messaging, I guess, for lack of a better term, that they don't like or that triggers them because of certain whatever woke or whatever their stuff is. I don't like that. I think it's mean-spirited and stupid. But part of me kind of wonders if developing these sorts of things is a good use of taxpayer or the time of a governing board like this in the first place, because it seems duplicative. Like if especially like if somebody gets elected to the school board and they don't like those values, they're not going to govern in accordance with them, because ultimately the job of the board is to develop policy, whether it's spending policy or policy. And I mean, that's the true expression of the values. What's the point of having this other thing that's sitting over here that doesn't, I mean, I think there's people in the public are very passionate about it and they care about it, but I'm looking at it thinking, what's the point of this?
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, that kind of even came up in conversation at the time. That was what was the point? Because there aren't actually we don't have any teeth in this. So like our administrative policies that govern our district, that's where the teeth, that's where we have, they carry the weight of the district. And so, I mean, to some extent, I kind of agree with you. Like I believed in these statements for sure. And I think that I think some people liked seeing them there. But the actual like inner workings of our district, that is rooted in our strategic plan, and that is rooted in our policies. And frankly, it's rooted in our budget. Like, where do we put our money? Where do we put our efforts? That's the real true work of our district.
So my question continues to be through all of this, and I serve on a nonprofit board who's had this exact same conversation. Like, how much do you put out there for the world to see? And for many good reasons. I mean, I know I have never lived the life of maybe what is considered to be a vulnerable or marginalized community. I know that. So I've got a lot of privilege in that part of the conversation. And does it, like maybe muting that a bit change the way we operate? And so what I'm hearing is it might be pulled from the website, but you're not scrubbing your administrative policies. You're not changing the way you operate. And that's where I also see the other side of the coin of, well, I guess if the Trump administration is really serious about this, wouldn't they actually dig a little deeper? Like, well, we're going to check your website, and if it's not on your website, you're good. That's where you're in a no-win situation, in my opinion. But
we are 100. I agree with you completely. We are 100% in a no-win situation with this. Yeah.
And what was essentially the threat of why you ended up removing the?
Yeah. So we did this when we did because the United States Department of Education was requiring all public school districts to certify compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and the responsibilities outlined in Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard. When you read the document and when you sign the document, you're basically saying that your federal funding, that if you want federal funding, you have to agree to these standards. Now, we as a board we know that we are in compliance. What does our president think is compliant? That's a totally different story. So we did this when we did because we were in the process of applying for and renewing a lot of our federal grants, which is $19.7 million. And we wanted to protect those dollars. We did not want to put ourselves at risk. I don't want our district to face a funding freeze. I don't want it to lose funds. And frankly, if we can, I'd really like to even avoid an investigation. So that's why we pulled them, because it was the state agencies that were tasked with collecting these certifications. So our board approved it on April 8th. I signed it that night and they were due April 9th. So we sent it in the very next day. And I think more than anything, it's because I'm not playing games with our federal funding.
I mean, I think that makes the most sense, right? I mean, we have an administration right now that's on a seek and destroy mission. I mean, they're looking for stuff. And so if you have something like this just hanging out on the website, it's a target on your back. I mean, that's what it is at the end of the day. So nothing's changing internally. I mean, I'm looking at a picture on Robin Hubner's article, of people, showing up to the school board and they were very upset and they were holding signs. And I understand that. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's the policy that matters. I mean, the rest of it is sort of irrelevant. Had you heard anything from the Trump administration specifically about Fargo or anything that we might be on the radar? Or is it just sort of, you see which way the wind's blowing, let's get out in front of this?
We had not heard anything specifically from them because they had tasked the state agencies with collecting these certifications. So we had not heard from them. But obviously our attorney was following very closely what was happening with the executive orders, and how Trump was interpreting certain court cases. And so that's why this came to us. And we were in the process of applying for these federal grants, and we had to sign that form. And so that's how we came to this conclusion.
I mean, I personally know a good number of you who serve on the Fargo Public School Board, and I've seen like your history of the way you view the world, the way you treat people, the way you believe in all kids and all of your staff. It seems to me a bit of a like, don't tell me who you are, show me who you are, kind of. It's like. And so I certainly trust that all of you, much like I believe in probably damn near every school board member across the state, really believes in doing what's best for kids always, and having to protect the funding that allows you to do that work, or that allows the staff to do that work. So, I mean, do you feel like this is just going to be the start of it? Is it?
Well, first of all, I want to say that, like what you said, like that has been the hardest part. I mean, like when people showed up with signs, I mean, that hurt, that stung, because like I do believe in these statements. And I mean, when people say protect our kids, I'm like, but we are, like, we're not taking any protections out. So, that definitely stung. And I've gotten a lot of questions about, well, what next? Like, so you're taking these down. So what happens if they go after our policies, or what happens if this digs in deeper? And I think that's a very valid question, and I think we'd have to take that case by case, kind of depending on what does it impact and what would it do. I think personally, as a board member, I would stand firm if it started to impact our students' experiences. Like if it was something that impacted access to the materials and the curriculum, if it was something that did impact their protections, those are probably places where I would be more willing to actually use our district resources to protect their education.
Don't know what we're debating about. It reminds me of the debates we have every 2 years, or when we have, the state political conventions. And there are endless fights over the party platforms, and people just get super hung up. They want this in there. They don't want that in there. And then they pass this platform and nobody cares about it for another 2 years. Because it has no teeth. There are, all the Republican or Democratic elected officials in all the various offices. They don't care that much about it. It's not dictating how they govern in office. So there's a part of me, and this is one thing I struggle. I think I've made it clear to the public how I feel about Donald Trump. If you feel like I've been ambiguous, I'm sorry. I've been laying it on pretty thick. But there is some utility, I think, in like, let's get back to basics. Because I watch a lot of government and I see a lot of this stuff and I just don't see the point in it. The policy is what matters ultimately. Actions are what matters ultimately. So if we cut through some of this stuff, I don't know that that's a bad thing. And even some of the, we're going to have a debate about the funding question in Minot State, and that really hurts. Minot State, I mean, that's in my community, and I've seen the work that this program does. It's really helped people. On the other hand, we have $36 trillion in national debt, and we're not getting rid of that without firing some people or not addressing that problem. So I guess, I don't know. I don't know what my question even is for you, but I mean, there is a feeling that there's some clarifying stuff. Like, we have to get serious about some of this stuff. And it feels like, I don't know, maybe, I mean, do you feel like this was extra now, having gone through this and I mean, do you kind of understand that perspective?
I don't think I'm understanding your question.
That was a question, and that's completely my fault. I mean, do you?
Well, so I mean, I just have a question about there. I think there was a letter to the editor in the forum following the action of the school board, basically saying that Fargo Public Schools jumped the gun on this, that the courts are actually preventing the executive orders from impacting these kinds of things. I mean, I think there is supposed to be like a firewall between the federal government and local school board operations, with the exception of making sure that there are protections in place for everybody. So, I mean, what do you say in response to that, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question too, because I think it was actually the day after we turned in our form, or a couple days after that there was a court that blocked the Trump's attack basically on DEI in the schools. So I think my answer to that is, again, I don't want to play games with our funding. And I think that our federal administration right now is so unpredictable. I mean, I've had people reach out and say, why didn't you just adapt the philosophies? So then 2-3 days later, what happens when something else comes out and suddenly we have to change words again? I mean, like, I don't want to live in this world where it's this constant cycle of what words are okay and our philosophies and what words are not. And so I don't actually feel like we jumped the gun. I mean, I've had a lot of people reach out and they'll say, like, put this back in the schools. Well, do you mean put the words back on the website? Because nothing changed in the schools. I've had people reach out and say, why can't you be like Harvard? We need more Harvards. We don't have the donors and the endowments and the money like Harvard does.
Harvard has a multi-billion-dollar endowment, and generations of excellent lawyers that they've graduated, alumni who could come in and help them out. Fargo has many wonderful people who have graduated from Fargo Public School. We're not matching Harvard.
Yeah. I mean, go Harvard. Like, way to go. Like, pave the way for us. I mean, I would love it. But I'm not playing games with this funding. These federal funds, this is a lot of title funding that really applies to some of our most vulnerable youth. And I'm not open to that. And obviously, you too follow the legislative session. I mean, how many times did you hear those lawmakers refer to Fargo and decisions
Too many.
that we've made? Yeah, too many. Too many. So I'm done. I don't want us to be a target. Leaving the policies up opens the door to actually losing funding that would seriously harm our kids and what happens in our school. But I think taking them down, it doesn't change anything operationally. It doesn't change anything procedurally. And I want the drama to be somewhere else and not on our district.
I found myself in an awkward, last session, they passed the bathroom pronoun bill. And then your superintendent at the time, Rupak Gandhi, was very outspoken in saying he's not going to follow the law. And I was critical of that because democracy starts to break down if public officials start picking and choosing which laws they're going to follow. We may not like the laws. I didn't like laws. I was mean-spirited. I mean, and I wrote that. But I had Representative Bill Twite stand up and read my column on the floor. And I'm like, boy, you are really selecting which parts of that column that you're reading. Because I didn't like what Mr. Gandhi did. I frankly, I thought it did a disservice to your district. I thought it put a target on your backs to the point where we just got another bathroom bill that just got signed into law that I think was motivated entirely by his actions. And I think and the thing is this sounds terrible because we're Americans, and I don't want people to shrink back when they feel like something's worth criticizing. But there's a moment, like pick your moments. And there's also a right way to do this, because if everything's turned to 11 and we're always going to say we're not going to follow the law if we don't like the law, then that just creates a snowball effect where we get, frankly, I think, to where we are now with this federal administration. So I don't know. I feel like we kind of paid a price for the decision that your superintendent made.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and a part of me is proud of him, and I spoke in support of that, and then a part of me is like, oh crud, what did we just do here? Because yeah, I mean, we became this target then, and I do think some of the bills brought forward, a lot of them were in reaction to that, and so it's like we're in this constant kind of reactionary mode back and forth, and that's not a great place to be with our funding, with our kids, with our schools.
But it's such a distraction where I get so tired. One of the things I don't like the culture wars is because I think it's so much grandstanding over things that don't matter.
Yeah.
I don't think that this philosophy stuff ultimately matters all that much, right? I'm very satisfied that the good people in the Fargo School District are taking care of the kids there. I'm pretty satisfied. I'd get worried if we started making big policy changes. Now I'm going to start to worry, but we get wrapped around the axle about things that don't matter. And we have these lengthy turmoil debates. I think sometimes we just need to think, does this really matter? Is this the hot hill we want to die on? Because sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Katie.
I would say, the whole bathroom bill, I mean, I'm sure you two watch some of those committee hearings. Like, they're talking about mirrors, they're talking about sinks, they're talking about wiping off toilet seats. And I'm just wanting to pull my hair out. Like, you were elected to be a state lawmaker to talk about bathroom sinks and mirrors.
I don't like that they banned the good bathrooms. Like, I was really excited. Like, let's move in. There's a side of, and I'm big on, like, let's find common ground where we can all agree on. So if you don't like trans people, fine. I don't agree with you, and I think that's mean-spirited. But can we get to a place where we each have our night's own little private stall in a public bathroom where I'm not sitting in some sheet metal enclosure where anybody can walk by and look through the gaps? Now it's a spectator sport, what I'm doing in there. Like, that was great. I was looking forward to the day I don't have to pee next to another guy at a urinal. I really like that. But now we can't do that because some people in the legislature are scared of trans people. I don't understand it. Like, that seemed like an easy solution. Let's just build the new bathrooms this way and everybody can be happy. But no, we can't be happy because we got to make it clear to trans people that they're not welcome in our state. It's just stupid. It boggles the mind. I mean, I just watch this stuff like, why are we debating this? This doesn't matter.
A couple years ago, I went to a concert at Red Rocks and, outside of Denver, and stood in line with literally as many types of people as you can possibly think of. Like, the man standing behind me felt like he was 7 feet tall, in part because I'm very, very short. But we entered the bathroom at the same time, where the stalls were completely floor to ceiling. There was a door with a lock on it, no cracks in between, and there was like a kid who went in front of me. And everybody went into their stall, came out of their stall, washed their hands, so help me, I hope they did, and then went about their business back to the concert. And it was almost like it was no big deal. But now, see, I got a little distracted with the bathroom conversation, but you did just write a column on that. Here it is.
In my defense, Katie sent us down that particular rabbit hole.
Yeah, whoops, sorry. That's my fault.
I do want to ask Katie, as a locally elected school board member, who I assume did not run for the school board so that you could have to engage or follow along or figure out how to implement when people get elected at levels above you in terms of, the higher levels of government, how much harder that makes the job you actually ran for. And does that impact the ability for really good people to actually want to do the job of being a locally elected official?
Yeah, 100%. Actually, one of the reasons that I ran is because I didn't want book bans in our schools. And I had heard of other school boards around the country that would come in and, like, they would ban books or they would try to limit how teachers could teach. And I am a former teacher. And I was like, I don't want anybody like that sitting on my school board. So I ran, and now I'm like, wait a minute. Like, now
This sucks.
lawmakers are saying this, and it's the federal lawmakers that are. So I feel like I ran because I almost wanted to protect the district from that outside noise and let our teachers do their jobs. Like, they're the experts. But now it's like, oh, wait a minute. So what do we do when the state tells us?
I don't like this this connotation of civic involvement, because it's like they show up for the crap that doesn't matter. You know, when they should be there when we're having like a really difficult budget question, right? Because that stuff's hard. The capacity to tax the public is finite. There's only so many dollars to go around. We have to make hard decisions about priorities sometimes. These are really important debates. Those debates, which are boring and tedious at times, the rooms are empty. But something like this, and people come out of the woodwork. But I ask you, which of these is more important? Right? The debate about the philosophies that ultimately don't really have any bearing on Fargo's policies at all, or the debate about the budget, which very, very few people show up for. That is frustrating to me. And yet you'll see people on social media talking about how politically engaged they are. And it's like, yeah, but I see what you're engaging on, and it's the fluff that does not matter. That is a frustrating thing to behold. And frankly, I'm sure the elected official on this call doesn't want to hear me say this, but we don't blame the voters enough for this crap. It's like, this is what you're voting for. This is what you're prioritizing. This is why we're doing this. This isn't a top-down issue. You voted for this, and now you're getting it. Anyway.
Well, I just want to. I'm mostly sorry, frankly, that you all were put in this position, because I do think it is a no-win situation. You will be probably chasing your tails for the next 3.5 years. I think it's wholly unfair because you don't know what the next little bit of drama is going to be. I appreciate that you are willing to do it, but I'm mostly sorry that you were put in the position you had to.
I appreciate that. I really do.
I think it was the right decision. I mean, why die on this hill? This, again, the kids, and then, one tier down, all the educators and everything that work in the school system. That's what's most important. That's who we got to protect.
Yeah. I'm not playing games with our federal funding. I'm not playing games with our funding. That's kind of what it came down to me.
And they are.
Yeah, and they are. And I'm
administration is. Yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
Versions of this debate are going to be playing out in local governing entities and programs across our local governments, across our state government, and the impact, the chilling effect that's going to have on people trying to do innovative things, people trying to get things done. I don't even know how to go about calculating it. Anyway, Katie, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie.
The cold cases you see at the Vault have captivated readers across our region for years. At the Vault podcast, our team of professional reporters takes you further into those stories with new interviews from family members, investigators, and experts. Check out The Vault at inforum.com/The Vault and subscribe to The Vault wherever you find your podcasts.
You'd expect to see the North Dakota oil and natural gas industry working at wells and processing facilities. What you might not know is our oil and gas industry also works to build roads, provide school funding, and even protect us from flooding by creating 60,000 jobs statewide and generating billions of tax dollars annually to support our infrastructure, our great outdoors, and our schools. North Dakota Petroleum Foundation, advancing the possibilities.
Well, I said some of the turmoil at the federal level was going to be a theme of this show, and I meant it. We are having shifted from our interview with the president of the Fargo School Board. We are now going to be talking about a program at Minot State University, which has been around. It's the North Dakota Center for Persons with Disabilities. And on a previous show, I talked about some of the federal funding that we're going after. And again, understanding completely the context that, $36 trillion in national debt. But when you cut funding, you got to understand for some of these programs, it's not all waste. Some of it has real impacts. It serves real people. And it's not just about the jobs lost. Some of this is infrastructure. So one piece of infrastructure is if you have somebody that you love in your life who has a disability, it's really hard for families to deal with that. Those things, there's just the challenges, whatever the challenge is, it's challenging to get education, challenging to get jobs, challenging to make sure that they're going to live a good life and not get forgotten or warehoused somewhere. And allowing all of that to fall on families who don't always have the resources, who certainly don't always have the expertise to deal with it. That is a reason why we have built programs like the North Dakota Center for Persons with Disabilities, which is centered at Minot State University, is to help provide some of those services. The person with me now is Kyle Erickson. Kyle, you may have read the news. My colleague Peyton Haug had a story about it, about, I think it was almost 24 people who lost their jobs at the center. Kyle is one of them. And I wanted to bring him on just to talk a little bit about what the center did and what it's like to go through that, because again, I don't think anybody on this call disagrees that our federal government's got to tighten the belt. But is this the way? Kyle, welcome. Thanks for coming on. What's it been like for you?
I'm not gonna lie with you or any of the other people on the podcast. It's been a wild couple of days here at the center.
Kyle, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you have been? So you were employed and one of the folks who were let go, is that right, from the Center for Persons with Disabilities?
Yeah, and it's interesting due to just some HR regulations. I'm still employed here, and I will be employed until the end of July. But there are a lot of people that were in those cuts. Of those 23, that they don't even have to. I mean, I have a coworker that's done next week.
No, Kyle, you're not somebody who worked at the center. You also received services from the center. Can you talk a little bit about what this has done for your life?
Yeah, so when I got hired here 2.5 years ago, it was kind of a neat little full circle moment for me, because one of the projects that NDC runs is called infant development, and they do a lot of work with early intervention, early diagnosis, screening, that type of thing. And I was born with cerebral palsy, so I spent a lot of my youth in infant development, and then just randomly, through the programs that the center does, I've been involved with this organization my entire life as a client, and now I'm an employee fighting to keep this place running for people that were like me 10, 20 years ago that do rely on the good work that this place does.
And Kyle, I think it's important for folks listening to know that the Center for Persons with Disabilities, while it is housed at Minot State University, it serves people statewide, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We are not a local entity. We have impacts in all corners of the state.
So can you just give up maybe a little bit of an overview? I think there are a lot of programs there that even I don't know all of them. While I'm a little bit familiar. I mean, do you have a couple examples? So you mentioned you received services when you were an infant, and now you are employed there, at least through July. What are some of the other ways that the center serves people with disabilities across North Dakota?
There's a few programs that I want to touch on. One of them is what we call the Navigator Project, and that assists people in getting health insurance that don't qualify for Medicaid or any form of insurance assistance. And because insurance is a complicated process, especially when you're trying to navigate that marketplace website. So that's the focus of the Navigator Project, is just assisting people to get insurance. We have what we call the Impact Consortium, which is we oversee several programs across the state at different universities that are inclusive of programs for people with disabilities. So that's another important project. We have ASTEP, which is the inclusive college program here on the Minot State campus. It's been going strong since 2011. And I would imagine a lot of local community members are familiar with ASTEP because the good work they do just in the city of Minot is amazing. And then we have we have a Project Echo, which provides training to people in the disability field. Yeah, and that's kind of and infant development, and yeah, and a lot of these programs are facing cuts. And what was really most devastating is that this just wasn't a one project cut. We have individuals in that 23 people that are getting laid off. We have individuals from every single project that our department runs. And so it's going to be devastating across the board if these cuts are allowed to go through.
So it would. I mean, it seems like they've already gone. I mean, it's. I mean, the university has acted. And I'm looking here about 45%, and I'm reading from Peyton's article. About 45% of the funding from the center is federal. The rest comes from state and local contracts. We're talking about $1 million grant administered by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. That's the Navigator program. We have grants valued around $60,000 from the State Council of Developmental Disabilities. I'm assuming that was probably federal pass-through dollars. Do you have, Kyle, can you share with us, like, how many people are we talking about being impacted? I mean, I understanding this is chaotic, maybe it's difficult, but do you have an estimate for how many people who are getting services from these various programs, how many of them are going to be impacted?
So that is 86,000 people in North Dakota live with disabilities. And I don't want to say push back on the opinion that it's already a done deal, because this budget is just both based off a proposed budget that the administration has introduced. So what I'm telling everybody right now is contact your state reps and let them know this doesn't align with our North Dakota values. We take care of each other up here.
So Kyle, can you just share from the perspective, not just of somebody who has disabilities and who got services at the center and who now is employed by the center, about the importance of, you mentioned North Dakota values, individuals with disabilities bring to the community at large. Like, what is the center meant to you as a person, but also what it means in a community to have individuals with disabilities contributing to a community like anybody else would?
Two things I kind of want to point out, but to answer that question is, first of all, the initial instinct of the typical North Dakota citizen is to think of people with disabilities as this nebulous demographic that they have nothing to do with. That's not true. There are 86,000 people in this state that have a disability. These are your neighbors. These are your coworkers. These are your family. These are your friends. By allowing these funding cuts to go through, you're basically telling all of these people, you don't matter. You don't deserve as good of a life as we do. And then the second point I'd want to put out is currently 1 in 4 Americans have a disability. And disability is one of the only minority groups in this entire world that eventually everybody's going to become a member of, because that's just advances in medicine. Our lifespan this long. So eventually everybody's going to have a disability.
I don't disagree with that, Kyle.
Kyle, has there been an effort to reach out? And I realize we're just coming up on the end of our legislative session. We have seen the lawmakers act. We saw some funding through FEMA that got cut for some infrastructure projects, like lagoons and things like that. We've talked about that on a previous show. The legislature did step in and replace some of that funding. Have there been conversations with the governor's office or with folks in Bismarck about replacing some of this funding that you're aware of?
Well, on the state level, I don't know. I think the major push right now is trying to get the feds to do the right thing. And that's why I'm encouraging people right now to reach out to, our federal representation instead of our state representation, because all of our funding comes from the federal end.
Well, I think I saw a quote from Senator Hoeven in one of the stories about, how they're looking into it. And that's what I feel like is always the response to these things. It's like, I continue to see social media posts by our federal delegation and talking. It's always waste, fraud, and abuse in a tweet. And then when it comes to responding to the actual impacts of these kinds of cuts, or maybe I would hope a realization that these are real people with real lives that are being impacted significantly by what some people are calling waste, fraud, and abuse. When I'm not certain that the program that you receive services from and that now you're employed by, Kyle, is waste, fraud, or abuse, but.
I saw a comment on social media. I made the mistake of going into a comment session on one of these stories, and the sentiment was shared that, oh, they're just kind of people that are getting paid to watch the grass grow. That's not true. I can't tell you the countless hours me and everybody else in the center have put into this job because we care about the work. And honestly, that's illustrated now more than ever. Because to be quite frank, most of us aren't even worried about losing our jobs. We're all very talented people. We'll land back on our feet. What we're more concerned right now is the people that we're not going to be allowed to help anymore. That's our main concern.
The thing that frustrates me, and coming a little bit from a conservative perspective, is we want people to be productive. We want people to be self-sufficient. That's the goal. And so, cutting this funding, the disabled people aren't just going to go away. I mean, so on whose shoulders does this challenge then fall? Are we just shoving it back on parents? And how do those dominoes play out? Because if you have somebody who's getting services and now they're not getting services, now they're going to be less sufficient. That means they're going to be more dependent and lean heavier on their support networks as well. They should. That's why families exist. But then what sort of decisions do those families have to make in terms of maybe somebody can't go to college now?
And also not everybody has a family to even take care of them.
That's also true. That's also true. So, how do we, where does this burden? I think of stuff like this as infrastructure. There's all sorts of federal spending that we could point to that's wasteful and that's kind of stupid, or that we can spend more efficiently. But this is infrastructure because people who have these challenges exist. Like you said, they're in our communities. There are loved ones, there are coworkers, there are friends. And where does that burden lay if we're not going to do it this way? I mean, this burden is still on us, right? Because the taxpayers are paying for this. But it's a way that we organized and we say, okay, this is how we're going to help this community become self-sufficient and be better. So even as a conservative, I'm saying this is a good way to spend money. I don't understand why we're doing it or what's going to happen with these people now that we're just not going to. And I shouldn't say we're not going to do it anymore. This program still exists. It's been cut, and it hurts. It's so I don't want to make it sound like it's ending though. Kyle, I was reading in the article that your last day is July 29th, and not to, get too personal or anything. And I know you're very much in it for the fight to try to save these funds one way or the other. But I mean, what's life look like for you if this really ends and you're really out of a job come end of July?
Do we want how personal we want to get, button?
What's that? I'm sorry, I didn't catch
that. How personal do we want to get with that question?
As personal as you're comfortable getting.
I have devoted the last 2.5 years to this cause, and to be honest with you, I'm sure that after the 29th of July I'll be okay, but and for obvious reasons, no job is going to be as meaningful for this as me. So imagine you finally found the perfect job for you. Someplace where you can thrive and help people like you. And then because decisions were made that you have no control over, all of a sudden it's taken away from you. That's what I'm staring down the barrel at right now. And that's why I'm fighting so hard, not only for me, but because this cause is so important to me.
Kyle, whether, you've mentioned now a couple times that you're not worried about yourself as much as you are the people you serve.
That's kind of a lie. I'm trying to.
Well, but I think it's fair to also be concerned about what will happen to you when you have found a job that, not just pays your paycheck, not just gives you a paycheck, but also fulfills what you find value in, and some, a way to advocate for people who may be in similar situations to you, who don't have the ability or the skills or the time or the support to be able to advocate for themselves.
So another really interesting thing I was thinking about yesterday is me, like a lot of other people with disabilities, we're in survival mode all the time. I've been fighting for my life for the last 35 years, and this just another bump in the road with me. But that's part of the problem. People with disabilities shouldn't be used to being in survival mode. We shouldn't have to scratch and claw our way just to achieve a life that a lot of people take for granted. And that's part of the problem is by cutting the government saying, we see you trying to make something of yourself and we don't care.
Well, Kyle, it's a terrible situation to be in. I mean, this again, I support us getting more efficient at the federal level. It's got to happen. But I don't want to balance the books by hurting people. And I feel like if we're more thoughtful about it, we can do it the right way. We're not doing it the right way. I really appreciate you coming on, Kyle.
The irony of it is that by cutting a lot of these disability service, we are taking away the ability for this demographic to be self-sufficient, which is going to lead them, depending on the safety nets the government provides, it's going to lead to them leaning on it even more, which is going to increase that cost. So why don't we be smart? Let's cut costs where it can be cut, and allow these people to achieve self-sufficiency, so they're not a drain on government resources.
You're totally right, Kyle. I agree with you completely.
There's what's the old saying? Penny wise and pound foolish.
Yes.
Yeah.
That seems like what we're doing here. I don't think this is going to save the taxpayers any money at all.
If anything, it's going to make it worse.
I agree with that. Kyle, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely happy to be here.
Hey friends, we've got a new way for you to participate in the show. You can now call us or text us with your questions, comments, or anything you want us to discuss on Plain Talk. Just give us a call or shoot us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. It's super easy. Leave your message, tell us your name and where you're from, and we might feature it on an upcoming episode.
Thanks for listening to Plain Talk. Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back. Aaron, one of the things that frustrates me as a conservative and a Republican is the degree to which, Trump and the MAGA movement seem to want to turn Republicans and conservatives into what liberals have accused them of being all these years. Because I think for a lot of years we were accused of wanting to push grandma off the cliff and a lot of really unfair things when people like Paul Ryan or Mitt Romney were pushing for, frankly, austerity measures, to try to get the federal budget under control. And some of the not from all liberals and Democrats, but certainly a lot of them.
Yeah.
That was really unfair. And now the thing, though, is that we're actually doing it. Like, we're actually trying to push people off cliffs. And I don't it's like we've just decided to be villains. And I say I'm not any part of this. I don't want any part of this.
No. I mean,
we're pushing somebody like Kyle off a cliff.
Yes.
Where's the plan?
When he made perfectly clear, he's literally been working his whole life to be able to be successful and be independent and live a life where he can pay for his, where he can have a job. Like it's funny when you said during that interview with Kyle that, as a conservative or as a Republican that you want people to be able to essentially live the best, most sustainable life. That is a common thread between us. And I am a progressive.
It wasn't my intention to suggest.
No, I know it wasn't. But it's almost like we don't share that value, as if as a Democrat or as a progressive, having strong social safety nets, whether that is in agriculture or in human services. We believe in strong safety nets. We don't believe in giving handouts to people who don't need it.
Right. Yeah. And the thing about the thing about this program is it's a safety net, but I don't like to call something there are safety nets that turn into hammocks, and that's a problem.
Sure.
This is a trampoline, right? This is something where somebody who has challenges in their life, they hit this and it bounces them into a sort of life where they can get a job and they can get an apartment and they can live a fulfilling life and have this
absolutely
prepare for retirement and not be I don't know the right way to put this, but not be saying somebody's a burden to their family is not the right way.
Yeah, and I know that's not what you mean, but I will guarantee you requires less financial assistance to live than it would otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much value and satisfaction that comes from taking care of yourself, right? It's one of the great, the payoff for having to become an adult and have to figure out what's for dinner every damn night.
I hate that so bad.
and shop for the groceries and mow the lawn and do the repairs around the house and all this stuff. The payoff on that is the satisfaction that you can sit on your lawn, look at your nice house, eat a nice dinner that you prepared for your family, and feel good about this stuff. I mean, that satisfaction, that is in some ways the meaning of life. And so we should want everybody to be able to get there. And
to be able to support others in getting there.
Right.
And
exactly.
And now that's what Kyle's been doing. He hasn't just achieved that for himself. He's helping other people also get there. And it makes me so angry that that at the same time folks will, wear their crosses and preach their Christianity all over the place, that they will be the first to cheer on things like cuts like this. Yes, I hear you and Chad talk all the time. I hear you talk all the time about how absolutely there are cuts that need to be made and there are efficiencies that absolutely can be found. That is not what is happening. This is an example of it. And I cannot believe that that people with disabilities are like one of the first on the chopping block. It makes me very angry.
Yeah, well, something's got to give. I mean, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in federal government. Lead with that. And I realize there may come a day where it's tough. It's tough choices that we have to make. And I'm even open to the idea of offloading some of this stuff from the federal budgets into state budgets. But that's a process, and we have to.
It is. And I think that, sort of transitioning now to what's happening at the state level. Yes, there are some tough choices that need to be made. And then I look at what some of the choices are. And I have long believed that our budgets tell us what our priorities are. And when we are willing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on some things, and while cutting programs for people with disabilities, programs for early childhood, the ability to I guess going back to Katie, pay school budgets.
Can you imagine if we invested as much time, took all the time and resources we've spent worrying about who's using which bathroom or what books librarians have in the library and things like that? If we took that energy and focused it on how are we going to help disabled people in our communities find jobs and live good lives? How are we going to help people who are coming out of prisons reclaim a place in society and be productive and avoid, the pitfall, crime and addiction.
Successfully live in their independence, yes.
What if we focused on things that really friggin' mattered?
When we were going into the interview with Katie, I couldn't help but think about, just in the relatively short in terms of, length of time that I have been involved in politics, and the number of ridiculous, overblown, whether they are conspiracy theories or whether they just never had a place in let's just say K-12 education. And I made a quick list. So the ones I have just experienced in the time, 10 to 12 years I've been involved in politics. Common Core, critical race theory, social emotional learning, furries and litter boxes, because that apparently was a thing. that allegedly schools are helping students transition their genders, grooming, book bans, and now DEI and wokeness. Like, how can people not realize it is just going to be one controversy after another because all they're doing is preying on your fears?
Yeah. And I don't want to be entirely dismissive because there's debates to have about curriculum. There really are. I mean, that's not unimportant. And there are valid viewpoints on it, but the degree to which we get obsessed because somebody read something on Facebook and they thought, well, that must be happening here, or we got to prevent it from happening here. And so we create all of this turmoil over something that's just not even a problem here, right? I mean, I get it. Like if we have a problem with curriculum and it's being too one-sided, like maybe we're not including enough about what we did to our Native American friends and neighbors. Like,
yeah.
Why? I once read a George Will column. George Will, who's a very educated, very intelligent man, who said he didn't know anything about the Tulsa pogrom. Basically, that's the word for it. He didn't learn about that until adulthood, and he had to learn about it from a fictional HBO show. And then he looked up the history and was like, "This happened in America." So yeah, we can have debates about what's in our curriculum, or on the other side of the equation, where we're only America's constantly the villain, because that happens too. We can have those debates. Those are valid debates to have, but we are wasting time on stupid things. And
But Rob, do you know where those debates should be had?
School board.
Yes, curriculum is decided at the local level.
Right now, and I think it just illustrates perfectly this mentality, because I think so much of it's driven by social media. I think these impulses existed before, but social media just turned the volume up on them.
Yes.
There's a situation where the woman in Rochester used a racial slur to describe a child. I don't know if you've been following this story. It's been blowing up on our news sites. But the woman, like first of all, she was called out. There was video of her, and so the internet found her, and then they doxed her and put her personal information on, and now she's getting threats. So it's like she's a bad person because she called a child a racial slur. But the internet's a bunch of bad people because they threatened her and put her personal information on and put her and her children in danger. And then she turns around and starts a fundraiser, and has now, last time, is closing in on $300,000 and is completely unapologetic for using the racial slur about the child. And Aaron, I'm looking at this situation saying, who are the good people in this? Where are the good guys? Because this just seems terrible. Like, the whole thing is terrible. And also, why do you care?
It's just like one escalation after another.
Why do you care that a woman called, like, you don't live in Rochester. Why do you care that a woman called a child? I mean, listen, I heard it. It's gross. I think it's disgusting. What a shameful thing to do. But in the grand scheme of things, this does not affect me in my mind.
Yeah, I don't know why local news has started covering those kinds of things. And depending on what because
it gets clicks, and we're in competition with the influencers who make all kinds of bank from this, because it's what the public wants. It's what the public wants. And I think that has come downstream into our politics, that what the public wants, they don't want to tune in for boring debates about line items in the health and human services budget. What they want is to talk about gay mafias and everything else that they're upset about, and just focus on it, and to the complete distraction of things that really matter and that could really change people's lives, like a program that helps disabled people live full lives.
Yeah. I just don't think we are well as a general society right now. Like, we are constantly outraged, and it does not make us
indulge outrage too.
Mentally well. I know.
We act like our outrage is a virtue. And to be fair, yeah, I'm outraged too that a woman called a child a racial slur. That's a gross thing. Yes, that makes me angry. How much time in my life am I going to invest in this? That some woman did it. That's a Rochester problem, right? They can solve that problem locally. I need to be focused on what's happening in North Dakota. But that's what the internet has done to us, where we can, I mean, some of these forums on Reddit, it's just but people losing their minds at fast food restaurants or in Walmart or something. And it's just people spending, I don't know how many hours of their lives commenting and dissecting and who got the best punch in and stuff like that. What are you doing with your lives? Why are you focused on this?
It also makes it impossible to choose where to devote your energy to something that matters. And I went to a recent, like a local Democratic NPL meeting or whatever, and that was sort of my advice. Like, you can sit on social media all day, you can keep cable news on all day, you can listen to anything that just reaffirms your position all day, and you cannot know where to devote your energy to something that matters. Or you can choose, like, where might you have an impact? And that's that. I guess that's where I lie is, where can I try to change an outcome for the better for as many people as I can.
Yeah.
I mean, what does outrage me is that people with disabilities are going to get cuts that they don't deserve.
Yeah.
And that I don't believe the majority of North Dakotans support. I don't.
And by the way, that's going to create real hardships for, I mean, they are not 86,000. That's the number. That's the number of people estimated that are living with disabilities in our state. And they're not all getting services through this program, but
right.
But that's going to hurt real people. I mean, that's going to hurt real people. And it's something that most people are like, yeah, of course we should have programs to help. But again, that's another thing. People don't think about this stuff until they need it. Right. I mean, we talk about criminal justice reform, and most people are never going to be in a courtroom in a criminal proceeding where they're the defendant. And so we don't think about indigent defense until you need a lawyer. We don't think about, the sort of support systems we have for disabled people until you have a disabled child. And that stuff's got to stop. But instead, let's weigh in on, who said what for two random people in a Walmart in Arkansas, because that's a super important way to spend your time.
Yeah.
There's so much of this is, I mean, that's really the problem is the bottom up. The politicians are reacting to this. It's not, it's a bottom up problem. And I think that's something that people just don't want to.
And it's just so easy. Like, come on. It is easy to focus on that kind of stuff.
All right, let's go to some listener feedback. By the way, you can always send us a text or leave us a voicemail, 701-587-3141, on social media as well, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, X. We are at Plain Talk ND. Let's see. The comment we got is personally, okay, so he wants to talk about the two school choice bills. He says, personally, I'm glad I saw 1540 and 2400. Those are two bill numbers from the legislature. He says, I'm glad I saw that they didn't pass. Even if it's not the majority of funds going to private schools, I think it's at best a gray area whether it violates the separation of church and state, because most private schools in North Dakota are Christian. That said, ESAs don't seem like a bad idea to get more money into education for special needs, school lunch, tutoring, among many other things. On a side note, do you guys think there's any chance the governor's veto gets overturned on 1540? Well, we know that the veto's not getting overturned. That's come and gone.
Right. That was actually quite a few days ago now.
Right.
Yep.
I don't like the separation of church, and actually the Supreme Court has this before them right now, and they're likely to come down in favor of states being probably what they're going to do. The headlines kind of drove me nuts because it was like the Supreme Court's going to authorize public money for religious charter schools, which I think is not the way. They're going to strike down state laws that prohibit that. And I think I'm okay with that. I don't, if you are going to make public dollars available for charter schools or private schools, I don't think you could discriminate against people based on religion. The law, I mean, we have a problem if we make it available only for religious schools. But if they're open to just qualifying schools that meet the standards of whatever schools that come through the door, whether they're secular, Christian, Muslim, whatever, as long as we're agnostic about that, I think that's all fine. I really thought both of the school choice bills, I like 2400 better. But I really like the focus on something that does something for everybody. I think tuition can be a component of it, but I think any bill that is focused strictly on subsidizing private school tuition is going to fail in North Dakota. I mean, the legislature may pass it, but governors may continue to veto it. And if it makes it into the law, it's going to get referred. because a law subsidizing private school tuition helps a very small fraction of North Dakota citizens.
And the majority of which, as seen across the country in these things,
don't need our help.
Just go to pay people who had already made that decision and who could afford it.
I agree
it doesn't create this big population of what they call switchers to go from public school to private school.
Right. So I just think, this idea that we're going to make, a subsidy available for people for private school, and then private schools are just going to pop up across the state, that's not going to happen.
Well, I again, just like these decisions have to come down to the choices where you are spending the state's resources. And there is a finite number of state resources. So if you are going to choose as a legislature, as the governor, potentially at some point, that this is where you believe is going to make the biggest difference and the best use of funds. At the same time, I continue to hear about waste, fraud, and abuse and transparency and accountability. Like that's not happening. It's not happening. And except when you put those public dollars into public entities, because then there has to be.
He said in his comment that he liked the concept of ESAs, and that's where I'm at too. I think that those done the right way can really make a good deal. And if we need to compromise and make some dollars available, if you want to use your ESA for private school tuition, fine. I know that drives Chad nuts.
Well, I mean, there's that makes two O-bands in one household. And I assure you, my position is not based on what my husband's is, which I've been accused of before. Trust me, I'm plenty opinionated on my own, and usually Chad doesn't even like my opinions. But I think there can be, and there could have been, some unity, as you have talked about, in the way an ESA is designed. But I do think it should be equal footing. I think it should be for the same things. It should not, in my opinion, give a benefit for something when it's not available to another. But I also, like, if this is really about giving people an ability to meet needs they couldn't meet before, then I don't need it. Like, we can afford to give Evan every opportunity, which we are very lucky to be able to do. If we wanted to use our resources to attend private school, we would, but that's not the choice we make with our resources.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I really like the idea of the funds. To me, I'm not interested. I don't have a dog in that hunt. I don't have anything against private schools. I'm not.
I don't either. I taught in one.
Yeah, but I like the Minot public school system. It's great. And and I'm already paying for it. So why wouldn't I avail myself of that? Which is nothing against our private schools here in town, but I like the idea of an ESA to give parents some flexibility, to maybe reach for some things that they couldn't do otherwise. Cause we're not bad off at all, but there are some camps and stuff that we had a little extra money that was dedicated for it. There's some camps, there's some other opportunities that we could. Thankfully, none of my children have learning disabilities. That's not a challenge that we have to live with.
Sure.
But if they did, it would be nice to have some money to help with dyslexia, or we just talk to somebody. I think this is another way to support and to make it very, very flexible. Like, it's a pot of money that's really going to be directed by parents. Obviously, we're going to put some guardrails on it. You can't just spend it on willy-nilly on whatever. I really like that concept, and I like the idea of getting the foot and iterating.
Keep thinking about what I always heard of the Republican Party was to keep more money in people's pockets so they can make the decisions of what they want to do with the money that they earn. And then I go to the how do we make sure people earn a wage that allows them to make the choices for the services that they need, whether it's for their children or for themselves. And whether you like to call it this or not, an ESA is an entitlement. It would be another entitlement program.
Yeah,
everybody paying for some people getting.
But school funding is an entitlement, right? We have decided as a society that every citizen is entitled to an education. and we fund public education. And to me, we're just tacking on to something that already exists. It's just another way to fund education. But this pot of money is going to be flexible and directed by parents and not necessarily school boards. And and parents who can then, take that little bit of money that they get and use it in a way that is specifically suited for their child. I think it's a way to make public schools who have to take all comers. And by having to take all comers, and I don't want to suggest that there's not cool, innovative things happening in our schools, because they are.
Yes, they are.
To me, this is just another way to help cool, innovative things happen.
And I think about what it's like, what it must be like to be in a position where you are working 2 jobs and your child needs to go to services. And then how do you even get that child to services? So if you have all of a sudden $500 to get your kid some extra help, which of course I would want any kid who needs any service to be able to get that service. I mean, I just think that we often forget about the barriers that exist in terms of having reliable transportation, in terms of living in a community where you have access to services, getting on a waiting list, getting a professional, like
those barriers are going to exist no matter what we do.
Sure.
We're not getting rid of a lot of those barriers. I mean, these families have challenges. I think it's a good idea, but the different perspectives are interesting. I mean, it's really interesting how we just, a while back you were talking about how you would ask, if you send your son over to somebody's house to play, you ask if they have guns in the house.
Yeah, I did. Mm-hmm.
And when you said that just seemed, and I'm not like being despair or critical of it, that seemed bizarre to me, because that is not something. I have lots of guns in my house. And they're
great. Happy for you.
Locked away in a cabinet.
Right.
But it's not something I would ever think of asking somebody. And I would feel a little weird if somebody, I don't care that people know that I have guns and I'm responsible with them, but it's not something that I would think to ask. But it's just such a fundamentally cultural difference. Am I saying that the right way? I don't know.
Well, it may be, and it might again be based on perspective.
I grew up with guns. I mean, I also grew up in Alaska.
So did I. Rob, so did I.
But on a different level. I couldn't go to school some days because there were wolves outside the house.
Sure.
I
mean, I grew up. My dad was a hunter. We had the gun cabinet was part of our living room furniture. Like, it never left. It was always positioned right under the light, like it was some fancy piece. So this, I mean, that it's the same culture, while maybe used for a different purpose. That I grew up in. The reason I do that now, Rob, is because I don't know how responsible other people are with their weapons. Great if you have them. I really could care less. I want to make sure my child is not put at risk because of your decisions.
Yeah, and I didn't bring it up as a criticism at all. I understand.
But I think you're right to point out that seemed a little weird to you.
It was something I wouldn't think to ask. Even as I look at some of the sort of Second Amendment culture that's creeped, I see a lot of people who are very enthusiastic about guns who clearly know very little about them, and that worries me. I mean, my dad had me out shooting a rifle when I was 5, teaching me, and he was a cop and he was a soldier and he had all sorts of firearms training, and really put me through it. I put my children through it. My children are not interested in hunting. They're not interested in guns, but they know how they work and they know the basic, because they exist in the world. And I thought that was important, that they at least know this is how they work. This is how you be safe with them, so that you know about them. And if you're not interested in them, that's fine, but this is what they are. And
I co-sponsored legislation that was all about the safety of like kids learning how to safely use firearms. I completely believe in it. I just want to make sure that, something doesn't happen at your house, because I wouldn't want that on your conscience any more than I would want for something to happen to my own child. So.
And it's just, we have so many different perspectives on these things, and it's just really important that we try to just not judge each other for them.
Yeah. Just understand.
Yeah. All right. We're going to put a pin in it there. Thank you so much for listening, as always. Well, hopefully the legislative session's there's some hot talk about it. They're maybe getting it done today. If they do that, it's going to be a very late night. And I don't know how we're defining today, because if it's 2:00 in the morning when they get done, is that really today or tomorrow?
Well, yeah, they'll still consider that the same legislative day as today, because they didn't gavel out. So Yeah, all the fancy little secrets.
All the fancy little stuff. Well, hopefully it's over. Because I really don't want to spend my Saturday watching more legislative hearings.
Yeah, I don't want you to have to do that.
I've had my fill for 2 years. I'll be ready to do it again 2 years hence. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk again.
Go Dodgers!
That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening. Now it's a spectator sport when I'm doing in there. That was great. I was looking forward to the day I don't have to pee next to another guy at a urinal. I really like that.